Well, good morning, church. Isn't that a fun video? Shout out to Chloe. She did a great job at that. If you're new, my name is Jeremy. I'm one of the lead pastors here, and so glad to be with you sharing God's Word. I want to welcome all of our campuses as well as our online viewers. We're so glad that you're with us. Today, we're starting a brand new message series, as you see on the screen, called Plot Twist. There's a twist in the story of Scripture as we look at the life of Joseph. Great story in the life. Actually, one of my favorite stories in all of the Bible, and one of the most significant stories in human history when you understand it. Now, we're not talking about Joseph, Jesus' earthly dad or stepdad. We're actually talking about Joseph from the book of Genesis. If you know Genesis, first book of the Bible, very, very easy to find. There's 50 chapters in the book of Genesis. And around chapter 12, all of a sudden the spotlight turns on this one family, Abraham's family. Many of you know or have heard of Abraham. Some of you grew up in church and remember hearing the Sunday school song, Father Abraham had many sons and many sons had Father Abraham. At least some of you know that. The rest of you, you'll catch on. But we see this one man who was promised to be the father of many nations, Abraham. And so Abraham starts having kids. He has a son, Isaac. And Isaac eventually has Jacob. Jacob's name is also Israel. And so Jacob actually has 12 sons, where we get the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of those sons is, you guessed it, Joseph. And so we're going to look at Joseph's story. And what's fascinating about Joseph's story in the book of Genesis, it covers 13 chapters. So it's about 25% of the entire book of Genesis as it traces his family and what's happening in his life. And there's good reason why, because Joseph's story is full of drama. It's full of tension. It grabs your attention. There's betrayal and dysfunction, and he's feeling forgotten and beat up and mistreated. And there's stories of reconciliation and redemption, even salvation, all in this one story. And just when it felt like it was going great for Joseph, all of a sudden, there's a plot twist. Hence the name of the series, Plot Twist. It's the idea, the series is the idea that what the enemy intends for evil in our life, God actually intends good, and he's planned good for us. That was true for Joseph, and I believe it's true for any believer who has ever felt mistreated, forgotten about, overlooked, or even stuck in a season that they don't understand. It doesn't make sense. And so today we're going to start by looking at the beginning of Joseph's story in Genesis chapter 37. Now, I would give you encouragement and homework on your own. Go ahead and read Genesis 37. For those of you who have already read Genesis 37, you might look at this chapter and think this question: where's God? Like you read throughout the entire chapter, and it's like there's no mention of God, there's no voice from heaven, there's no divine intervention, there's no miracles, there's none of that. And yet, I promise you, if you'll stick with us over the next 7 weeks, you'll find this truth, that God is actually the main character in the story. Now, Joseph may not realize it yet, and we might not realize it yet either, but behind every twist and turn, behind every corkscrew and upside down loop, God is guiding the story. It makes me think of roller coasters. I don't know if you know this or not, maybe I've shared this with you before, but I kind of have a little bit of a slight trust problem with roller coasters, not to mention I get sick on the ones that go upside down and do the corkscrews. I shared with you last summer, we took our two oldest boys, Aiden and Ethan, my wife Erin came with us, and we went on a lot of roller coasters, and you know, the one roller coaster, I can't remember the name, is Ragara or something like that, but you notice who's missing in this picture? Yeah, yours truly. This is where I was supposed to be. I'm not there because previous rides before this, I got sick. In fact, it was the second roller coaster we rode that day. I lost my breakfast going around one of those slow curves after a bunch of corkscrews and upside down flips. I just was like, I'll spare you the details, but it was ugly. And I just have a little bit of a trust issue when it comes to these types of roller coasters, because when you go on these roller coasters with the shoulder harnesses, you're guaranteed to go upside down. That's why they're there, right? And so whenever I get on one of these types of roller coasters, I'm always like checking like 4 or 5 times if that harness actually locked. Forgive me for not trusting the kid that doesn't even look like he's graduated from the 8th grade. You know, it's hard to put your life in the hands of someone who can't grow facial hair. But so I just try to check this thing, and I have no trust whatsoever And then just when you start the ride and you start feeling a little comfortable, you remember that carnival ride video? Has anyone ever seen this video where the carnival ride, I don't have the video, but the picture, where it's not a theme park, it's just like one of those honky, county fairs, and the thing starts tipping over, and all of a sudden, all these bystanders like rush to this ride to prevent it from toppling over. Crazy stuff, super comforting, right? When you're riding these rides in a carnival, or you remember the story of Cedar Point. Some of you in our southern tier campuses have gone to Cedar Point before. It's a really, really cool theme park. But Cedar Point released a new ride called Siren's Curse that opened back in April, I believe. And since its opening last spring, it's broken down no less than 4 times. Now, here's why that's significant. This roller coaster detaches from this track, pivots 90 degrees, and you hang there until it's reattached to this track down here. And it broke down right here, and so they had to get emergency people to escort these people down this 160-foot curve. Super comforting, right? Well, here's the truth. Life often feels just like this. Everything's going great. Life is wonderful. And then all of a sudden, someone hits the emergency brake and there's a crisis. Like that door of opportunity shuts in your face. That relationship goes south. Everything goes sour. There's trials, there's trouble. And it feels like you're stuck. And you ask this question, who's operating the ride? Like, God, are you there? It doesn't seem like you're present. It actually feels like you're absent. And that's exactly where Joseph finds himself in Genesis 37. In just one chapter, we're only going to look at chapter 37 today, but in just one chapter, we have jealous brothers, we have a dysfunctional family, we have betrayal, and we have this promising future of Joseph that's suddenly ripped away from him, and he's asking this question, who's operating the ride? God, where are you? And so if you look at this chapter alone, and I promise you we'll get to the remaining chapters later in this series, but just this chapter alone, you kind of have this impression like that God must be absent. But God is not absent in this story, church. In fact, far from it. He is present in the details. And so this is the big idea that I want you to get today, and really not only today, but for the entire series, and that is this, that even when life seems out of control, God is not. Even when life seems out of control, I promise you, you serve a sovereign God who is totally in control. And I would suggest to you that sometimes it's during those moments where it feels a little out of control that God is doing some of his deepest work. And many of you can attest to that. So with that said, let's walk through this passage together. And I want to show you 3 specific ways that God worked through Joseph's life. And in doing so, there's a parallel application for our lives today. So here's the first way that God worked through Joseph's life. Number 1, isn't this super comforting? Family dysfunction. You're like, I can relate to that. Well, good. So here's what the story starts off with. Verse 1 says this. Jacob, or Israel, lived in the land of his father's sojournings in the land of Canaan. These are the generations of Jacob. Joseph, being 17 years old, was pasturing the flock with his brothers. He was a boy with the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Little tattle-tailing going on here. So Joseph is 17 years old when we start this story, okay? Oh, what it's like to be 17 again. Wouldn't you love that? And some of you are like, no, not really. That's okay, I don't blame you. But when you're 17, there's lots of ambition. You look forward to what's ahead. But for Joseph, there's a lot of family tension as well. He gives a bad report. He tattletales on his brother. You think that earned him some popularity points? No. Okay? And it gets worse. Verse 3 says this. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was the son of his old age. And he made him a robe of many colors. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peacefully to him. Okay, so parents, listen, right? You know this to be true. If you have more than one kid, you know that you're not supposed to have favorites, right? You love all your children the same. They're unique, but you love them all the same. But apparently not all parents understand that principle. For example, I heard of this story. Many of you know Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders was a famous football player in the NFL for the Atlanta Falcons, Dallas Cowboys, 49ers, and really, really good player. His prime time was his nickname. And he's now the coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, Colorado University football team. And he posted a while back, he posted these power rankings for his kids. So he wishes his son Shador a happy birthday. And in this post, get this, he goes 1 through 5. He's got 5 kids, and he ranks them 1 through 5 in order who's his favorite. And it changes from season to season, who's like more nice to him and all that stuff. And he's quoted as saying this: "I'm the only one honest about ranking my kids. You act like you love them the same, and you don't," right? It got me thinking about our Shingle House campus pastors, Pastor Tim and Mandy Taylor there in Shingle House. They have 5 kids. I don't know if you know this, but they have 5 kids, 4 boys, 4 girls, 1 boy, excuse me. Shout out to Lukeil O'Neal, Luke, right? And it got me wondering, like, what's their power ranking? Like, is Luke like number 1 because he's the only boy, or is he like number 5 because he is the only boy? I don't know. Maybe Pastor Tim should release some power rankings tomorrow morning. We would really look forward to that, Tim, if you could put that on Facebook. Just joking. That could really start some things in the Taylor household. But it got me thinking, right? In Jacob's house, there is no mystery. There's no mystery. Joseph is clearly number 1. And that favoritism creates a culture of dysfunction and jealousy and hatred that ends up not being good for Joseph. Now, a little background here I think helps. In that culture, the oldest son, you need to understand, stood to receive the family's inheritance, the family legacy. They were the most important. They were the most favored. Here's what's interesting about that. Reuben was actually Jacob's firstborn with Leah. So Reuben, in the 12 tribes, the 12 sons of Israel and Jacob, he's actually the oldest. He's the one that was supposed to get the inheritance, the family legacy. He was supposed to get the favoritism, but he doesn't. And the reason why he doesn't is because he was the firstborn son of Jacob's wife, Leah. And if you know the story, Leah was the one that he kind of got tricked into marrying by his father-in-law. She was the one that kind of Jacob tolerated. And so Reuben didn't get the favoritism. Then Joseph actually became the firstborn son. Next slide there. Joseph actually became the firstborn son of Jacob with Rachel. So Rachel wasn't the wife that Jacob tolerated. Rachel was the one that Jacob cherished. Now that's important. Now, before I go on, let me just say something to the guys. This is descriptive, not prescriptive, okay? So if you think about getting another wife, don't. It's not good, not a good idea. Chalk it up to Jacob's father-in-law that messed this whole thing up. But he's got 2 wives. All that to say, Joseph, here's what you need to hear. Joseph is the favorite son of the favorite wife. Very important detail. So when Jacob gives Joseph that coat that you've probably heard about before, the coat of many colors, he's not just giving him a gift. He's actually putting a target on Joseph's back. And the reason why it's a target is because these brothers hate him for the favoritism and the blessing that he's getting from their father. By the way, doesn't this sound just like a biblical episode of Jerry Springer, right? You've got multiple wives, sibling rivalries, all this discord and dissension. It's crazy. And yet, God is still working. God is still working through all this dysfunction. Some of you know what it's like to grow up in a dysfunctional family. Let's just be honest. Some of you actually came to church with a dysfunctional family. Don't look at them now, but sometimes that's real, right? Just saying. But please hear me. Okay, please hear me. We can't let the family we came from limit our view of what God can do in and through us. Good or bad. You could have come from a bad family or a good family, a dysfunctional family or a functional family. You can't let what you came from actually dictate what God can do in and through you. If you know the Bible, you know it's filled with stories of messed up families that God used. In fact, God doesn't just kind of like work around the dysfunction. He actually works through this dysfunction. In Joseph's story in particular, he's going to use this dysfunction, this very dysfunction that we're seeing, the jealousy, the dissension, the betrayal. He's going to use all of that for a divine purpose and set Joseph up for his future assignment. So that's the first thing. We see that God works through family dysfunction. The second thing that God worked through in Joseph's life is, number 2, divine dreams. So after the dysfunction, Joseph actually has some dreams that he shares. In verse 5, it says this: "Now Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, 'Hear this dream that I have dreamed.'" So here's the dream. "Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field." Isn't that how every good dream starts, by the way? We were binding sheaves in the field. "And behold, my sheaf arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves gathered around it," go back, "and bowed down to my sheaf." Then it says in verse 8, his brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to rule over us?" So they hated him even more for his dreams and for his words. They already hate him, but now they hate him even more. He's tattletelling. There's a coat of many colors. And now this dream where his brothers have to bow down to him, they're not too excited about this dream. But it gets worse because there's not just one dream, there's actually 2 dreams. Verse 9 says, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars." So the 11 stars are his brothers, the sun and moon are his parents. "And they were bowing down to me," Joseph said. "But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, 'What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come down to bow ourselves to the ground before you?' And his brothers were jealous of him." I just find this phrase really interesting. "But his father kept this saying in mind." Like his father rebuked him, but in the back of his head, he's thinking, I wonder if there's something behind this dream that's going to come later on in Joseph's life. How many of you know that not everyone is going to celebrate or applaud when you have a dream or when you experience success? Like, that's just not the reality. Sometimes people will not applaud and cheer for you. Now, in this case, we don't know exactly what Joseph's intentions were. Maybe he was just a little dumb. After all, he's only 17 years old. No offense to 17-year-olds, but your brain has not yet developed fully yet, right? Or maybe, I think this is probably the case, maybe like a lot of younger siblings, he liked to push his brother's buttons. Any younger brothers like to push their older brother's buttons? I was a younger brother. I know how that works, and I know our boys do that as well, right? Can anyone relate? Yeah, of course. So either way, it just doesn't go well. But here's the point that I want you to see. Here's the point. The dream doesn't make Joseph's life easier. The dream actually makes it harder, which is the complete opposite of what we often think about dreams. Like, we're told to chase after our dreams, have a dream, may all your dreams come true. But in this instance, Joseph has a dream, and that dream actually leads to conflict. It leads to tension, it leads to his brothers hating him, and it leads to his father rebuking him. And then, there's another thing I want you to notice. This is interesting. God gives him the dream, but not the details. He gives him the dream, but not the details of the dream. And there's nothing about betrayal. There's nothing about slavery or imprisonment, and on and on and on the story goes. I don't want to give it all away, but there's nothing about the details in the story, just the end result. What's the end result? The end result is good. The end result is people bowing down to him. The end result is him ruling and reigning. Of course he wants to share this story with his brothers. He's the hero. He's the main character of the story. And so it's no wonder that he's telling the story, right? And so in other words, God mentions the destination without any mention of the painful road it would take to get there. Isn't that interesting? But in a way, when you think about it, isn't that God's grace and wisdom in our lives that he operates that way? So for example, parents, if you have kids, if you have more than one kid, if God or someone were to have told you all the sacrifice, all the sleepless nights, all the pain, all the heartache, all the staying awake, why would any of us have more than one kid? Like, really? If we knew everything that we were going to have to go through. If you knew everything that you were going to have to go through, why would any of you, finish that degree or start that ministry or start that business or homeschool your kids or, do this and that? Like, if we knew everything that was going to happen, all the pain, all the hardships, all the trials. If God told me everything that I would have gone through the last 15 years before becoming a pastor, all the pain, all the trials, all the sometimes it was painful, right? I would have probably said, thanks, but no thanks, God. I don't know if I want to sign up for this. But God, in his infinite wisdom and grace, gives us vision at a pace that we can handle. He tells us not everything we want to know, but everything we need to know in the moment so that we'll trust him in the process. There's a big difference to that. And that leads to the third thing that I think we see in how God works in Joseph's life, and that is through difficult detours. There's some really difficult roads and detours in this story that we're going to see over the next 7 weeks. We start seeing it here in verse 12. So verse 12 says this: Now his brothers went to pasture their father's flock near Shechem, and Israel, or Jacob, said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock at Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." So he sends Joseph on an errand, and he said to him, "Here am I." Okay? So he said to him, Jacob says to Joseph, "Go now and see if it is well with your brothers and with the flock, and bring me word." So he sent him from the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. Okay? And a man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked him, "What are you seeking?" "I'm seeking my brothers," he said. Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" And the man said, "They have gone away, for I heard them say, let us go to Dothan." So, recap here. This is what's happening. Jacob sends his son Joseph to check on his brothers, and when he gets to Shechem, his brothers are nowhere to be found. And so he just so happens to run into this stranger in a field who just so happens to know where the brothers are. Question for you: is that coincidence? Or maybe a little bit of providence going on, a little bit of guiding with God's invisible hand? Can I suggest to you today that God often works in this way? He often uses people in our life, maybe friends or strangers, coworkers or family members, to move us in the direction and the destination he wants for us. In your life, it could be a friend, a timely word that they say to you. It could be a mentor that speaks something into your life that you don't see. Or it literally could be a complete stranger that just happens to show up at the exact time that he needed to speak something or she needed to speak something into your life for you to see it. For Joseph, this encounter, on first reading, it seems like a random detail, but it's so important because it's the turning point that leads him down an unexpected path, or we could say an unexpected pit. So here's what happens in verse 18. They saw him from afar, and before he came near to them, they conspired against him to kill him. Like when I said they hated Joseph, they really hated Joseph. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the coat of many colors, the robe that he wore. And then it says this: and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then the Midianite traders passed by, and they drew Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. Dun, dun, dun. And this is where we're going to pick up the story next week. But the sermon's not over yet. It's hard to imagine things getting any worse for Joseph in this moment, right? I mean, he's betrayed by jealous brothers who hate him, want to kill him. He's thrown into a pit, and then he's sold like a piece of property. Like, how could it get any worse? Betrayal, disappointment, and one massive detour. And yet, through it all, here's what we know if you read the rest of the story, which I would encourage you to do. God was orchestrating every single step. We teased it out a little bit in the intro video, but through this story, God's going to save a nation. He's going to save a nation. So here's the one application I want to leave you with today, and that is this. I want you to trust that God is working even when life feels it's unraveling. Trust that God is working even when it feels like life is unraveling, because it often does feel that way. Whether it is or not, it feels that way. Like the carnival ride, toppling over, tipping side to side, or like Siren's Curse, where you're just stuck there, wondering if anyone's operating the ride. That's how life often feels. If Joseph's story reminds us of anything, it's that there's no such thing as smooth sailing or smooth roller coasters. It ain't a thing. Jesus said, in this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome this world. And God is really good, church, really good at getting us to the place he wants us to go. Now, he may not always give us the details along the way, but he's really good at getting us to where he wants us to go, and he never wastes a step. So, just throwing it out there. Maybe consider all of this the next time you experience some delays in your life where you prayed and you're expecting God to work, but he doesn't show up immediately. And it might not be a yes right now, but it might not be a no, it might be wait. Maybe consider that. Or maybe consider it the next time that you go through some difficulties in this life. Yes, it's hard now, but God is taking you and actually doing his deepest work through that difficulty and trial. Or maybe consider it the next time you have some detours, because it's actually those detours and those people that he sends along the way that God could actually be setting you up for a future assignment that he has in store for you. We learn all of that through Joseph's story. And who knows? Those people that he sends in the field, those strangers in the field, actually might be a part of God's divine plan. You know, earlier in ministry, I had very specific plans, very specific dreams, which looking back at that, you know, those dreams and those plans, it's kind of laughable to think about it now that I see more of the picture of how it all worked out. But some of you know our story. I kind of hesitated to share this story because I've shared it with many of you before in our church. And then I just thought, you know, like a good grandpa, it's okay to tell some stories like 10 or 11 times. It's okay. And especially there's new people to our church, so it's important that that I share our testimony and some of the history, a little bit of the history behind our church. Obviously, there's more parts to it than this, but so some of you know our story. I started out in youth ministry early on as a youth pastor, and just felt like God was doing something else in us. We couldn't find a job in youth ministry, and so God brought us down to Texas, of all places, doing media ministry of all things. And so for 3 years, we were just doing media ministry there, but yet those were some formative years where God was doing a work in us and preparing us and stretching us for what he had in store. Well, in 2008, we went on a vacation to New York and went to Wellsville to visit some family and friends. And it was during that trip, no agenda, no plans, but we just felt strongly this sense that we were to move back up to New York to either pastor a church or to plant a new church. And so fast forward 8 months from that moment, and I'm standing before some family members and friends at the public library in Wellsville, presenting this vision of this church and what it could be. And I'll never forget the night. It was December 30th, 2008, where I stood before this congregation, this group of people, and presented this vision. And it was that very night where God sent what I'll call a stranger in the field. His name was Ken Lyman, who served for many years as an elder at our Wellsville Alliance Church, which is now our Wellsville campus. And I hope the other campuses appreciate if it weren't for this man's faith and his heart to serve the local church when it was struggling, many of you wouldn't be here today. And that's a testimony not to him, but to God who he serves. And so he shows up, and I don't have a music stand. I don't have a music stand like this for my notes. And so I asked my friend, Ben, who had an uncle, Ken, in town, if he knew anyone who had a music stand. He says, I have my uncle Ken. He's an elder at a church, so he brings this music stand. And it was that very night. I didn't know this at the time. I learned this later on. It was that very day where their pastor of the Wellsville Alliance Church resigned. And that was the first domino to the story. And it started because God sent a, quote, stranger in the field. But that wasn't the only stranger in the field that he sent. Rewind the story. Back in the fall of 2008, Hurricane Ike hit the Houston area and kind of destroyed a lot of our property. It ruined our roof. It did some damage to our fence. And this was feeling called back up to New York. So we knew we were going to have to sell our house. And so a few months passed after the storm, and we still have not yet heard from our insurance. And we all of a sudden get this knock on the door from an insurance adjuster who who says this. He apologizes for being so late, but there were so many claims. And he looks at the property and he assesses the damage and he says, you are not going to be charged a deductible. We're going to cover the free cost of this roof and a new fence. How many of you know it's a lot easier to sell a house when you have a new roof and a new fence? And oh, by the way, in the middle of the housing crisis in 2008. You know how that happened? All because of a, quote, stranger in the field. Now, here's where the story gets wild, right? We need to sell our house. We put it on the market, but we have not yet even put a sign out front in our yard or even listed it officially on the website. And all of a sudden, one day, the first day the house is on the market, the car slowly pulls up to our curve. And I'm outside working, and he says, hey, sir, is this the house that's for sale? The next day, we had a full asking price offer on that house in the middle of a housing market crisis where our friends were waiting 2 or 3 years to sell their house. Like, how does any of that happen? And then multiple stories after that God worked in our campus pastors' lives, in replanting a lot of these churches, in your lives in particular. God was working. How does any of that happen? I'll tell you why it happens. God has a plan, and God is really good at getting you from where you are to where he wants you to go. I had plans. I thought my plans were good. If you ask me, I had it all laid out and I had a timeline. But I'm so thankful that God had better plans. And you might have plans too. Can I just say to you today, lovingly, God has a way of messing with your plans, church. But it's always for your good. It's always for your good. Even when the door's shut, when there's heartbreak, there's confusion, you feel disheartened, you don't understand why, you feel stuck, you feel forgotten about. All that stuff may be true, but God has a plan. And I'm telling you, if you'll trust him, turn to your neighbor right now and say, if you'll trust him, church, if you'll trust him, you'll find that those delays and disappointments are often the very things that God is using to prepare you for where he has you next. Even if for nothing else, it's not, may all your dreams come true. That's not the point of the story. Even if for nothing else, that you become more and more like his son Jesus in the process. Becoming more patient, persevering, having endurance, being kind and loving. All those things that God is producing in us as he's getting us to the destination he has us. And oh, by the way, the scriptures say that his plans for us are always good for those who believe that he is still in control. I want to invite our worship teams to come forward at all of our campuses as I pray for us. Lord, thank you for your word. Thank you for this story, Lord. It's good to know because it's part of our redemptive history, but it's also super applicable to our lives because it parallels much of what we often go through and what we often feel in our journey of faith. And like Joseph, I know many of us are struggling with seasons where we're waiting, we're wondering, we're struggling with pain and hardships, and we don't know why we're going through that. We don't know what purpose. We certainly can't see what's on the other side of it. And honestly, Lord, that's really, really difficult. Really difficult. And so, by your grace, I'm asking, Lord, that you would help us put into practice what you've called us to do through this passage, that even when life feels out of control, even when it feels like it's unraveling, we can trust that you are in control, you are sovereign, you have a plan, you're working that plan, it's for our good, and you call us to have faith in you. And so faith is a gift. We ask that you would help us receive that gift, trust in that gift each and every day, believing that you are the same yesterday, today, and forever, and how you worked in Joseph's life, you will also work in our life as well. Help us trust you today. And it's in Jesus' name we ask this. And all God's people said, amen.